Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to the new season of CIO Leadership Live. I'm your host, Mary Fran Johnson, CEO of Mary Fran Johnson Media and the former editor-in-chief of CIO Magazine. Since November 2017, this video show and podcast has been produced by the editors of CIO.com and the digital media division of Foundry, an IDG company. Today's episode is sponsored by Broadcom, a global technology leader specializing in semiconductor, enterprise software, and security solutions. Headquartered in Palo Alto, California, Broadcom's enterprise product portfolio addresses several critical markets, including cloud, data center, networking, broadband, and wireless connectivity. Broadcom's VMware division, which was acquired last year, also offers a comprehensive private cloud platform called VMware Cloud Foundation. To learn more, please visit vmware.com. And now onward to today's guest. I'm very pleased to be welcoming to Leadership Live Alan Davidson, who is the CIO of the Global Technology Organization at Broadcom. He joined the company in 2016 as its director of IT infrastructure and was then promoted to CIO in 2020. Alan reports directly to the CEO. His broad range of responsibilities encompass the strategic direction and evolution of the company's technology landscape, as well as its e-business application suite, hardware and software product hosting, and the security operations. Prior to his current role, Alan held a variety of key leadership roles in three of Broadcom's legacy companies, Hewlett-Packard, Agilent, and Avago, where he oversaw everything from enterprise infrastructure and data center management to software product hosting, SaaS operations, customer support solutions, and more. Alan, welcome. Thanks for joining me here today.
Thank you. I didn't realize I was that busy, but yes, thank you.
All of a sudden, you're feeling a lot busier than you were feeling an hour ago.
Correct.
All right. I want to start out with a kind of a high-level perspective on the most notable IT industry trends that you've seen impacting Broadcom's business and customers, probably not just during your last couple of years as CIO, but with your long tenure in the industry itself. You've had kind of a catbird seat on all the different changes that have taken place in IT leadership. So give me some perspective on what is emerging now that you're hearing a lot about from your own CIO customers.
So, obviously there's the AI elephant in the room that's certainly front and center of the topic of the day. But there are a variety of trends that are happening both in the SaaS application area as well as the infrastructure area. And there's always the perennial, where do you run your workloads? Do you run it in public cloud versus private cloud? And then the adoption of the different technologies. So I think the way we're tackling that really is looking at that from a workload characterization perspective. So really, we view the only thing that's constant over the multiple years that I've been doing this is business problems are still business problems. So business fundamentals don't change. Technology evolves typically every 3, 5, 7 years, whether it's hardware or software too. So how you solve those problems may evolve, hopefully get easier, simpler, quicker. But I think the variety of technology today is something I probably couldn't even have imagined even 10, 15 years ago in terms of just the capabilities that the hardware, as well as the public cloud and obviously the private cloud will bring to that landscape. I think the other key challenge really is the regulatory space is significantly evolving at a high degree of pace where, the problems of 2-3 years ago are certainly not the problems of today, and how you address them are going to require a higher degree of discipline, both in your data modeling, your data privacy, your data localization. So it really focuses on the data and how you protect that. And then obviously the third one is security. No real change. Everybody is still healthily paranoid around the level of both external as well as internal threats. As we are expanding our employee base, as we're expanding our breadth and depth, that becomes a bigger issue as we go forward. Just to make sure that we're protecting the right things at the right time. So, security, the regulatory stuff. But I think the more interesting space is technical evolution and how it really addresses business problems. So, I think, like I say, the AI mantra, I would say in the media has been very well publicized. I don't like the word to use is hype. There is some reality behind it in terms of the technical capabilities, but I'll go back to my business problems to solve. So what problems are you really trying to address with that type of technology?
Yes.
So some of that may be, I don't think there's probably a good easy button for it in terms of, hey, it's a panacea to solve all problems, but I think it can have some astonishingly good results when applied correctly. So those are the areas that we are focusing on. I think how we address them is going to evolve over the next 1 to 2 years. As you have stated, we acquired VMware last year, which has been an interesting year. That's kept us slightly busy. So, one of the key foundations of that, obviously, as you mentioned, is the VMware Cloud Foundation, or VCF, that we are implementing as part of our private cloud offering. So, again, we're really taking a look at our cost portfolio. We're highly cost sensitive. As the lineage of Broadcom, it has around 26 different business units. 17 of them are hardware, 9 of them are software, or infrastructure software. So the lineage of Broadcom really came from the hardware side of the business. So again, there is definitely a DNA of focusing on margin, focusing on cost effectiveness, with a maniacal focus, I would say, on that. And we've really tried to install that DNA in the software side of the business as well. So as we go into managing the depth and breadth of the portfolio now, it really comes to, we need to develop standardization and platforms to accommodate the variety and complexity of the workloads that are there.
Yeah. Well, when you mentioned that the AI elephant in the room, that is certainly a topic that every CIO that I've interviewed on this program for probably the last 2 years has had a lot of thoughtfulness going into it. There's a lot of discussion. Sometimes there's action happening on staff. I've had some CIOs tell me that, well, at the end of the day, it's really just more math. But the excitement that it has generated out in the public, and I noticed the old eminence grise among the research houses, Gartner, recently declared that AI had entered the trough of disillusionment, where, which, all those sine waves that Gartner will put out, is ultimately like everybody thinks, oh my God, this is the solution to everything. And then we're back down into the reality of it. Is it mainly in the work you're doing with your VMware integration that you've gotten more directly involved in the AI strategies, or is that something that Broadcom has been doing in different areas over the last couple of years anyway? Where do you stand on that in terms of where it falls on your priority list?
Yeah, so I think there's two aspects to that. One, from the product side, obviously we are we produce some of world leading inference and AI related chipsets, as well as networking components on the hardware side to support the large scale compute and networking capability that's necessary to run some of these models, certainly in the hyperscalers and some of the larger companies out there. So, from an infrastructure perspective, we've been engaged in AI for a large number of years before AI was part of the psyche, because these things don't happen overnight. Typically a 3 nanometer or a 2 nanometer design or chip design, merchant silicon, happens over 2 to 3 years. And then you need to manufacture, So we've been probably looking at this problem for the past 4 to 5 years to figure out how to really enable some of the high throughputs and the TPUs that are required. On the software side, I think it's certainly more recent in terms of how do you then take advantage of the large-scale processing power to really solve business problems? What issues are you trying to resolve? And I think I'll go back to my previous statement of it's not one size fits all. I think we've got some very interesting use cases that are coming to market now in some of the product areas. Semantic is one that springs to mind, where they have, their issue in the past has been security. The output of some of the results from a security standpoint has been very technical. So to understand, hey, am I really having a problem? I think the implementation of AI in that model and that inference model, in terms of really being able to generate a more tactical and action-driven outcomes that makes sense to more people. So, they had a very technical output that they've used generative AI, they've used their inference models, they're really trying to make this more effective so that people take action quicker. So are you having AI generate your threat model? No, I mean, the threat model's still there, the core foundation is still there, but how you take action, what are the next steps? I think AI is helping them significantly to go to make that quicker. So, because from a security standpoint, it's all about time to action. So if you can get a quicker action, it helps. So I think that's a good example from a product standpoint. There are a number of other things, that are more, I would say, generic things around customer service, call deflection, things like that. But part of the challenge, as you stated, it's just math. It really is a lot of matrix multiplication and some good guessing. So, but ultimately, you can't get away from the fundamentals of your data needs to be as it's the garbage in, garbage out scenario of you will get a really wrong answer very quickly if you give it wrong information.
Right.
So, we can't lose sight of the fundamentals of your data needs to be relatively accurate in order to get the best use of whatever aspect you're trying to get out of AI. So again, we're looking at, I would say my acronym for AI over the last couple of years has been always investigating. We've tried a number of different things, as most other companies are doing. We're kind of dabbling a little bit in terms of where things are. I think we're moving more into the actually implementing things. That may be the story for 25 and 26, where we can really take a look at again, but we view it from a business problem perspective. It's not really technology. It's we'll measure it on call deflections, we'll measure it on revenue increase, we'll measure it on some customer satisfaction metrics, but it needs to be fairly hard tactical measures in order to justify the investment, because right now the investment in AI is not for the faint of heart. If you are doing multiple POCs without good return, it's costly. It's not cheap. So I mean, we are I would say it's not so much disillusionment, but I would say you're now getting if you ever run cloud, public cloud, you have a FinOps team. So you have a people who really look at the financial operations of public cloud. I think those same people are being better used now in managing AI models as well. Because you really need to look at how cost effectively are you making use of the model. So even if you're solving a big problem, if you're bankrupting yourself at the same time, that's not a business outcome. So you just need to make sure you have a more cost effective model to figure out what real problem you're trying to solve. I think in that regard, again, I'll go back to workload characterization. So some of the things that we are trying out, we'll probably try out on premise first. We have a fairly robust model from a private cloud perspective on the VCF thing, where we can have a relatively safe to fail playground in some of that area. So, we let software do the hard work. But I think, at least we can try in a cost contained way to implement some of the things that we're trying to achieve. But I think at scale, we have a fair amount of scale. At scale, probably 25 and 26 is when we're really trying to make that turn into transition.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that scale of the company itself, because you had mentioned that I think it's 26 different business units, or is it 26 different business units, 17 hardware focused. I think around the world, Broadcom has something like 40,000 employees.
Correct.
And when we talked previously, I was, I guess, surprised and impressed to learn that you're managing this global technology organization with just shy of 300 people, around 292 on staff, and that it is, you're also operating at less than 1% of revenues for your IT budget. And so I want to talk a little bit more about that and how that plays into the changing culture of the company, those 26 different business units, the history of hardware and the Broadcom's background as a wireless connectivity provider. All of that is changing a lot. So let's start with, how is that changing the culture of the company from your point of view?
So I think like I say, our DNA was always brought up in the hardware business unit. So we were highly focused on margin. We weren't so focused on the top line revenue, but we were focused on how much money you make out of the dollar you're making. So that has really been a part of our DNA moving forward. And it's slightly, I'd say that's more ingrained in the hardware side. I would say typically from a software business, they're more focused on top line. They're more focused on, hey, can I get the next customer? Can I get the next revenue? And they're less focused on the bottom line. So I think from a management of change or a culture, it's more impactful on the software side or the infrastructure software side of the business units, which are the companies we've acquired over the past 4, 5, 6 years. But I think once that DNA is installed in that group, it's very effective in terms of just focusing on the business problems, focusing on the cost. But from a scale perspective, I'll probably use VMware as a more recent example of what we're trying to do. So we acquired them back in November 2023. We're very simple people in IT. We like to count low numbers. So we had a day 1, day 2, day 3. So day 1 was everybody onboarded, and the additional people came on board to Broadcom. Everybody got a login ID and they got paid, they got email, that type of thing. So all good. Then in May, which was our day 2, we consolidated all our business applications. So we retired a significant number of legacy VMware business applications. and we consolidate to one common ERP system, one common CRM, financial system, and then day 3 is still in process. So day 3 will happen at the end of this calendar year. So day 3 is our infrastructure model, where we are consolidating. We inherited around 31 data centers from VMware. Broadcom had 11. We will end the calendar year with 7 data centers. So we'll have around, and logistically that is it's a lot of things, a lot of moving parts. So we have to be highly focused on what we're trying to do. I think at scale, when we're talking about at scale, we'll probably end up with around 30,000 compute nodes, around 200 petabytes worth of storage. But really, the key to this is standardization. So how do we manage 26 business units plus 4 functions? I still have to play nicely with HR and finance and legal. They are my friends at this point, my companions. So, but the 26 business units, they have a significant variety of workload characterization, and we may not be the biggest scale company. I mean, the hyperscalers are, you add more decimal points onto the end, so they've got way more scale than we're trying to manage. But I think the diversity of workload is significant because each of these business units are wildly different in terms of what they do in order to generate their end product, from highly customized ASIC chips to SaaS operations for security to pipelines development stuff. So it gets fairly interesting very quickly. I think the key to operating this, like you say, at a significant cost envelope of less than 1%, plus with less than 300 people on staff, is standardization. So the way that we do that is we have what we term 3 platforms. So we run mainframe. The mainframe group is fairly unique. So the operations piece is run in the actual mainframe, but we have 3 mainframe pieces of equipment that we support. We plumb in. It's water and electricity is always fun in a data center, so it's always good. But we manage that connectivity there, and again we view that as one platform. The other one is we have a significant footprint in our chip design grid. So we run around 15,000 nodes and 100 plus petabytes worth of storage on our chip design. So that's bare metal. That's 15,000 pieces of bare metal equipment. High degree of compute, high memory capacity on these machines. It takes a lot to generate some of these chips. The smaller the number is nice from a theoretical physics perspective, but it means you go from a 5 nanometer to a 3 nanometer chip, you quadruple the size of the compute and the storage required to generate that chip. So it's getting up there. I think our chips now have round about anywhere between 50 to 80 billion transistors on a chip. So plus we always go for the next one as well. So we're never designing the stuff that's already in play. We're always designing what's coming next. So it's not getting any quieter. I believe we run around. We just hit a fairly interesting milestone. So we track runtime hours on our grid. So we just hit 2 billion runtime hours on an annualized basis for our grid. But which sounds impressive, but it's actually more impressive that only 4 years ago we were running at 1 billion. So in that 4-year time, we've increased a billion. So it's the rate of change that you have to manage. And again, you can only manage that if you enable fairly strict standardization within both the compute set as well as the storage set to really enable that scale.
Well, it's interesting too, because what you were saying about data and operational standardization, I've been around the industry maybe as long as you have. I was at Computer World before CIO Magazine, and a lot of the things you're talking about, I can remember having conversations in the 90s with CIOs about this. And it could be that there's just a natural sine wave of what's in vogue, but it also could be that as companies get more complex, you have to head back to what sounds almost old-fashioned, to be talking about data simplification and operational standardization, but there's no other way to do it and run really financially sleek, is there?
No. If I was to, so I think, part of the way that we make this work is our organizational structure. I think
okay, good. I was going to ask you about that next.
Yeah,
yes.
I'm in a very, I would say, privileged position within the company where IT drives, IT is not driven by the business unit. So I report to the CEO. So it's a good news, bad news story. So, but it's mostly good news because you get very clear direction, very clear decision making. Because it's a one-to-one relationship. If I was to try and negotiate with 26 business units on a variety of topics, my budget would be 4 times what it is today, because I'd have to accommodate. Everybody has a good idea. Everybody has good justification as to why their thing's more important than somebody else. And typically, in certainly in companies we have acquired, that has been the case. We've made a significant degree of cost optimization as we've acquired the companies that we have done.
Yes.
Simple, and it's not because people don't know what to do. It's just organizationally they've not been allowed or aligned to the business objectives to allow them to go execute to that. So I'm in a fairly privileged position to be able to say no. That's not, and if they have a problem, they have nobody else to go to other than the CEO, which is never typically.
Nobody wants to kick it that far upstairs, do they?
Exactly. So,
well, I remember you said that when we talked earlier, that you're there to make everyone successful, not to make everyone happy. And
exactly. Yeah.
That surprised me a little bit too, because for a long time, CIOs have really felt pulled in several directions. You have to keep the business unit presidents all happy. You have to keep the CEO happy. You have to get out in the field and talk to customers. And it's such a complex job. And when when we were talking about the sheer scale of what your global technology organization is running, plus the fact that you guys gobble up very big companies like VMware just last year. It seems like at some point the organizational approach would need to change for that. But it seems like you've just adapted your kind of straight down the middle approach to that, and it's been working pretty well.
No, I think, it's one of those ones where, like you say, we used to, I would say about 10 years ago, maybe 10, 12 years ago, we actually did run a CSAT and try and figure out if the business units or our internal customers were satisfied or happy. We stopped doing that because it actually didn't matter if we were 4 out of 5, 3 out of 5, 1 out of 5. It was more, we then changed the focus to, can I manage it on a what cost constraints have I got? What capabilities can I enable? And I can make you successful, even though it might not be exactly the path you want to go on, but I will enable your capability in a standardized way and drive that level of standardization and capability. And the way we measure success is I do have a very low burden on their margin from an individual business unit. So our budget splits 26 ways. So their cost of running IT operations or IT as an allocation is significantly lower than it would be in any other organization, and if they ran it themselves. So it is definitely the GMs do see the value, but it takes time. It takes time to build that trust. It takes time but I think, like I say, the relationship this only works because IT reports directly to the CEO, and the CEO manages the
Yeah.
It provides air cover.
It's hard to imagine that could work as well if IT was reporting into the chief financial officer or the chief operating officer.
Yeah.
Have you been in leadership positions before where it wasn't reporting to the CEO and that brought its own raft of difficulties?
Absolutely. I'm an HP alumni. I'm an Agilent alumni where it definitely wasn't that. It wasn't that way. And I've gone through it back in the 90s, in the interesting days. I worked for a multi-billion, HP multi-billion-dollar corporation, lots of business units, lots of issues going on, lots of fuzziness going on, which is fine. But I think, HP seemed to lose their way in terms of they focused too much, they over-engineered too much on the feel-good factor for people and lost sight of the fact that if you really go study Bill and Dave's kind of mantra on the HP way, their first rule of thumb is make money. Okay, make money, then you can go do the other things that you need to make. So it definitely got lost in translation a little bit. But we went down to, we started, I would say, the real focus and maniacal focus on cost and standardization really happened when we split out from Agilent onto Avago around about 2006. So that was where we really started honing our operational efficiency and effectiveness over time. So that was when the DNA really kicked in, and it's scaled. So we haven't, from 2006 to now, not really changed. Because if your fundamentals are correct, if your fundamentals on data quality, if your fundamentals on standardization and focusing on what business problem you're tackling and your measurable ROI, and you can execute to that, you're allowed to execute to that, then it scales. We are living proof of that scale. And I think it's actually coming more to fruition now as we go into as we get into day 3, because I mentioned 2 of our 3 platforms, which is mainframe and our grid. The third one is where we're having, I would say, our more interesting impact now. So as we acquired VMware, we are now generating our own private cloud. So prior to VMware, we had I would say we tried to do our standardization model. We standardized hardware okay, but the software piece, the orchestration piece was a little fragmented. Just for the various technologies that were on the market. But I think now that we've gone into the VMware journey, the VCF platform is helping us consolidate to I would say our third platform. So our VCF platform, the private cloud, that allows us to then manage that at a software level. So it will then increase our level of automation. It will increase our level of standardization and enable workflows, the multiple disciplines of workflows to run on that platform. But ultimately, it goes back to, I still only are running less than 300 people. Now, do I partner with contract and subcontract people to run 24/7 operations? Absolutely. I have a company that runs for hardware, a company that runs for my business applications that run, I would say, operations. 300 people are not going to do that for the company of our size. Right. But I would say the level of focus and efficiency of execution happens with these 300 people or 292 where really they're empowered to go drive change and they're enabled to go drive change. So again, if we have these 3 platforms, we give a strategy to the teams to allow them to enable that change regardless of where you are. And like I said, we still have our public cloud spend, we still have our private or on-premise spend. So we still manage that overall portfolio. But I think we do not stray from our fundamentals. So if we do that, then we're lost. So we cannot customize. We cannot be unique from a capability perspective, but we can allow that uniqueness in the end from a customer's perspective or our internal customer. We can allow software to configurable software to allow that level of customization.
And Alan, when you're having conversations today with customers, or when you're hearing about the customer conversations around private cloud, talk about what you're hearing from the customer base about the problems they're running into, and what Broadcom can essentially share its own best practices about doing it. I mean, I suppose it certainly would help owning an entire company that has become expert in doing that. But of course, if you're talking with people that are not in the IT industry, they can't necessarily do the kind of data center consolidations and standardization that you have made such a practice of at Broadcom. So from the customer point of view, talk about private cloud, about what you hear on the problems they're running into. I think I said to you when we talked last that it seemed like private cloud is really having a moment where we used to just all be talking about public cloud and it was going to save so much money. Oh, well, no, it doesn't actually save money, but it's so much faster and it keeps the engineers happy and, all of that. And now it seems like private cloud, not just from Broadcom, but from a lot of other companies. So give us, talk with your perspective on that landscape a bit for me.
So I think the primary driver to go to public cloud was ease of use. It was always available, and the public cloud never said no. Infinite capacity, always it's Candyland for engineers.
All you needed was a MasterCard.
Exactly, a very big MasterCard, but it was consumption was very easy. Whereas when the public cloud first started, I would say, and even from a Broadcom perspective, I think the provisioning, deprovisioning, allocations, forecasting, all that was a manual, slow, not responsive. So it was very appealing. The public cloud is a very appealing place, and like I say, I'm not anti-public cloud. We use public cloud today, so it's not that the public cloud is the wrong thing to do. It's the right thing to do for what workload is there. Okay, I'll go back to my fundamentals of let the workload determine where the right place to run. I think to your point, the private cloud concept is having a moment again, but hopefully a more sustained moment, because I think what's happening is there's a maturity in public cloud versus on-prem, where people have now got the bill. Okay, because for every dollar you spend in the public cloud, you're not just spending that dollar for the compute you're using, you're spending that dollar for the compute you possibly could use, because they have to sustain that level of scale, they have to sustain that level of capability, for good reason. So it's not, but I think it's a significant, you can control your costs a lot more granularly, as well as have more constraints and overall management on premise. I think the key difference now is that usability and customer experience from a usability perspective. If you define it as a platform and you don't get into conversations with your business units as to, well, how am I going to define my networking? How am I going to define what storage you're using? What's the vendor you're using? Because you never have that conversation with the public cloud. They just give you a compute networking. So if you're not going to question the public cloud, don't question internal IT. As long as you can provide, as long as you can give a user experience to your customers that looks and feels like a public cloud, the usability piece, I think, is now evolved to the point where it's comparable. So there's enough capability to allow them to have ease of use. So it's not it's not ticket based. I'm not putting a ticket in to say, hey, in 5 days somebody from IT will get back to you and ask you the same questions you put in the ticket, and then 6 weeks later you might get a machine.
Yeah,
it's self-service. It's an ability to self-provision with constraints. So what we've done now in the VCF platform is split up by orgs, by security groups, by different capabilities. But again, let's let the software determine that level of multi-tenancy, because we are a service provider within Broadcom. I mean, we service 26 different businesses, so it is a fairly interesting role. But I think we do have a Coke and Pepsi problem where we have one groups that can't see other groups' data, and we have localization, sure. We have regionalization, we have different capabilities the same way as everybody else does. So I do need a platform that allows that segmentation, but segmentation with software, not hard segmentation with each one has their own data center and we're
right.
So I need cost containment, I need standardization. So I think if what we've now provisioned, and that's part of our day 3, which will finish up at the end of the calendar year, by that point we'll have consolidated all these data centers into 7. But the reason we did that was it's not, I mean, it sounds a crazy number, but in terms of data center reduction, but a lot of them were in remote geographies. They weren't big. Some were bigger than others. There was a lot of disparate and unique servers and storage and things and being managed in different ways. So really what we're doing is actually reducing the physical footprint. We're reducing the actual number of compute and storage that we got from VMware, but we're actually then consolidating so that each one of these 7 data centers has enough materiality in terms of scale so that I can give a little bit of flex within these environments. I can move workloads around within the environments, because ultimately I still need to be able to patch, I still need to be able to do security patches, I still need to upgrade things, we still need to move workloads around. So if I'm doing that in 30 data centers versus 7, it's more complex. So we don't like complexity, we like simplification.
I know. You've brought that up a number of times, yes.
Simplification is our watchword of the day. So we don't like to solve hard problems, I like to solve simple problems. So make the problem simple.
Well, simple problems times 26 business units times 40,000 people. I mean, my idea and your idea of simple problems is probably a little different here. I wanted you to talk about one specific thing we had discussed previously, that the compute load that you are running right now on private cloud is 4 times cheaper than it would be if you were using public cloud for those services. Did I get that right? I want you to explain how that happens. Is it because you're a giant technology company and you're not the shoemaker's children? You've got access to everything you need to make it work. Whereas if you're a bank, you might not be able to, well, that's not a good example because banks had private clouds back in the 90s as well. I just how much of your ability to run in such a fiscally responsible and financially saving kind of way on private cloud has to do with the fact that you're a $36 billion technology company.
Well, we're actually 50 billion, but that's okay.
Oh, are you 50 billion? My mistake. Sorry.
That was 2 years ago.
But still, you get the point. Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. So I think we view ourselves, there's a couple of and people may not believe this, but it doesn't matter if they believe it or not. I know it's true, so that's all that matters.
So there you go.
We are not mandated to use any specific software that Broadcom has internally. We are a customer. Good. We are a customer first and foremost. So, like I say, we're a service provider. So we do our own evaluation. We make sure it's the right fit for what we want to do, because my job ultimately is to keep the lights on. My job is to make sure that the business units are successful. If they are successful, it means that they're able to access the business applications, that access the infrastructure. They are. My biggest compliment is people don't actually realize IT is in the way. Okay, we need to be an invisible layer of infrastructure and capability. So I don't want people to have to understand what IT is, because then I've failed at what we're trying to do. So really, it's really about trying to give them, like I say, the same sense of capability. But we did our own evaluation of, say, the VMware platform. We did our own evaluation prior in the due diligence exercise as part of coming into the acquisition, where was that going to solve the problem we needed it to solve? Yeah. And we spent a lot of time, because that's a fairly interesting exercise to go tackle, because it's a fairly disaggregated environment we're going into. So yes, fast forward 9 months, yes, it works. Yes, we've stood up our private cloud within internal applications. And it's one of those ones where, like I say, we use the public cloud and we use the on-prem stuff, and we will continue to use the public cloud. It's not that we're not going to use it, but we'll use it for what it's meant to be used for. So yes, we understand what we spend in the public cloud. We understand what we spend on premise, and when we're doing our cost evaluations, I don't get anything for free. When I'm doing the evaluations, there's no free software. So we get, we always add on what would a normal customer, on average, a typical enterprise customer be charged for the scale that we're doing. And we add that cost in when we're doing our cost comparison, because otherwise we're just kidding ourselves. We're just making ourselves feel good. And that's a distorted reality nobody lives in very, very successly. So we have
not for very long these days,
not for very long, exactly.
Yeah.
So, there has to be a level of realism that we're doing this because it makes business sense to do from a capability and a financial perspective. So we have, again, I'm in a very privileged position. I have a level of autonomy I can say no, that isn't the right fit. And we've done that. We've acquired products where we've not used that product because it just didn't fit our model. But I think the VMware environment was a good fit. I think we also support the DevOps environment, or their pipelines, the environment. So I know. I can see the back end, I can peel back the cover, I see the back end engineering effort going on from an integration perspective, from a capability perspective. So I know moving forward it's a longer term platform, because we're not in this for a year. This is a strategic objective for the next 5 to 10 years. As we're going to do this, because ultimately, from what I see in the industry and talking to other people, I've got the same problems as everybody else. I've got a long history of legacy stuff. I've got a long history of things that are not modern, but are trying to become modern. I've got things that are ultra modern, that are out there. The percentage of the ultra modern stuff to the legacy stuff is anywhere between 70% to 80% is the legacy, 20 to 30% is the more modern. And now other companies may be slightly different, but I would say the people I talk to, it's fairly similar. You might get the odd one that's maybe 60%, 40% who's really done a good job, but I would say there's still a majority of legacy architecture out there that still needs a good home to go to, because they're mission critical. These things are running because they serve a purpose and they're mission critical. So they can't. Technology should never be a reason to solve a business problem. It's the wrong way around.
It's the business problem has to drive the technology choice.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
When you think about the private cloud journey that you're on now or still on, does it have an endpoint where you want to get to a certain percentage of the workload is there, or does that just get determined as you go along bit by bit?
No, because it's not. I would say right now, like I say, we spend double the amount of cost in the public cloud than we spend on-prem, but I run double the workload on-prem than on the public cloud. So if you do the math, it's four times. For every virtual CPU, it's 4 times more expensive. So, but it doesn't actually matter because it's it does matter from a costing perspective. So it absolutely matters. Yeah. But we're a highly acquisitive company, as you've seen over the last 10 years. So it depends on who we buy next, or what workload is or what new product has been developed by the various groups. Depends on where that should reside. From a cost perspective, I will always go with, hey, you should run it on-prem because it makes cost better. But if you are needing what the private cloud won't be able to accommodate very easily is seasonality. So if you've got Black Friday events that are doubling the infrastructure or trebling the infrastructure for a month or 3 month period of time, that's not a good use of private cloud. So seasonality, high degree of variability is not good. But if I can do a better job of predicting and standardizing on the workload and the capability, it will always be on-prem because there's enough capability and technology and resiliency in that environment that I can give the same SLAs as public cloud. I can give the same ease of use as the public cloud on-prem for a quarter of the cost. So we'll talk to the GM. That's a no-brainer because they should be focused on margin.
And as you've pointed out, most people even in Broadcom, they don't really care what's under the covers. I mean, as long as they get to their services, it's just you're there to make them successful, not to make everybody happy.
Exactly.
I love that. I haven't heard that kind of attitude, I don't think, in a really long time. And it's refreshing in a lot of ways. It's sort of like, let me make you successful and let's stop measuring internal satisfaction.
Correct. Well, it's a little counterintuitive to start with, but it makes sense the more you pound that drum, simply because it's what do you view as success? What do you view as being happy? Okay, it's very hard to describe satisfaction. What's satisfaction? That my program ran in 5 minutes versus 5 hours. My uptime was good. Does that matter? Kind of. But does my business objectives? Does my ROI? Does my revenue growth? Does my margin matter more? Probably. So if my business is successful, I'll make my employees successful. I'll make my that rather than focus on spending more money for some unattainable goal of satisfaction. Why bother? Because people never put a metric on it. No, they do a one.
Or if they do, it's one that somebody's created on the form. I want to pivot over. We've talked about the importance of the financial discipline that IT leaders have to bring to IT, and then all of the technology advances that are enabling new things with old topics like private cloud. Yeah. But there's a key issue that you and I talked about in terms of being an effective IT leader and business problems and finance and solving those sort of things. It was more about relationships. So as we wrap up here, I want you to talk about what you have learned in your CIO position over the last 4 or 5 years. What has held most true to you in terms of what makes a really successful CIO today?
So I think, being able to, even though organizationally, I think I have an advantage because I report to CIO and I have to interact mainly from a decision and a strategy perspective from that viewpoint. But I talk to every single GM at least once a quarter, if not more. You have to make sure you understand their issues, their problems, because I need to evolve the strategy based on their feedback, not necessarily Hawk's feedback. So having a very tight relationship with each of the GMs is key, and the functional leaders. Obviously, you like HR and legal better than everybody else because they pay you and keep you out of jail, but that's okay. I think most of the conversations I have with the GMs, I've got nothing really related to technology. It's always interesting to talk to them around what are they seeing in their market segment? What challenges are they having from a capability perspective? Are they over capacity? Are they under capacity? Are they having to furlough some people? Are they having to hire more people? Because it just goes to that level. But you have to do that on a regular basis. This is not an annual exercise. This is every couple of months of just touch and base, providing that relationship, because it's much better that the first phone call they make is to me and not to the CEO if they have an issue as well.
Yeah.
Okay. If they really have a problem, manage that problem. But I think that's from an organizational it's not rocket science, but it's amazing how many people don't actively do it because
it takes you out of your comfort zone.
Yes.
A great number of IT leaders are just as introverted and would prefer to have more thinking time than a lot of their own technology leaders that report directly to them. So it goes a little bit against the grain, I think, for IT leaders just in general.
Possibly, but it's so important because you can't affect change, and that's really what motivates, or what I believe. I will speak on behalf of people, which is never a good thing. But my sense is, in order to keep a team effective and implementing and executing, they have to be able to see that they're affecting change in a positive way. And they be able, if you're looking at, getting up at 7 o'clock on a rainy Monday morning in November, and it's dark outside, and you've had a hard weekend. What's keeping you? What's getting that fingers on keyboards and making that extra effort to go ahead and do what you need to do? Because this is not there are no passengers here. Everybody's accounted for. Okay, that's everybody has a value that they're bringing to the table. Where we don't do fluff very well, which is it gets interesting. But I think it's we pay people, we give people stock, we pay people salaries. There's a money aspect to it, which is one aspect. But ultimately, you do this over a period of time. Money becomes less of a motivator, and it's all about motivation. So motivation is what's the strategy enabling me to go execute? Can I have a better interaction with the customers that I have, both internally and externally? And can I be seen as a enabler of change to make a better experience, regardless of what you're doing? So is it more self-serving? And it's not, hey, I need to be the master of. Sorry, I can't say master. Sorry, the primary person of the environment. You can't. The most successful people are the ones that have enabled others, so that they're not trying to grab hold of that magical tribal knowledge or things that are that's there. So I'm more. We're really more about enablement and self-service and defining the platforms, defining the capabilities than I'm the best expert in technology X, and there's I'm going to hang on to that for dear life. We don't have there are various different types of people in the organization. We have, I would term, I'm probably going to be politically incorrect, and I apologise, but I'm not intentionally. We have mushrooms and we have flowers. The mushrooms are they do like to do their own little thing in their own little comfort zone, and then we have the flowers who are blooming and all over the place. And sometimes I need a combination of both. You need to keep doing what you're doing, but you need to innovate. So it's trying to get that healthy balance of just keeping the lights on in an innovative way is an oxymoron that we're dealing with on a daily basis. But that's what keeps it interesting. That's what keeps it exciting, even just for.
Well, and from a gardener's point of view, and I'm very into gardening just in general. The mushrooms are part of the basically organic amendments that you need to the soil to produce the flowers. So I don't see anything wrong with mushrooms and flowers. You actually need both in your garden.
Yes,
and so I think that all actually works out pretty well. Thank you so much. It was really fun talking to you today. I learned so much about private cloud and about how you are running this enormous global technology organization at Broadcom. And so it's been a pleasure having you here today, Alan.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.
Now, I hope that as you're watching us here, I hope you enjoyed my conversation today with CIO Alan Davidson of Broadcom. This episode is the latest addition to our very extensive library of CIO Leadership Live podcasts, where we have more than 130 in-depth interviews with prominent chief information officers, all of them available on CIO.com and also on CIO's YouTube channel. Our show is also available as an audio podcast wherever you find your podcasts. Please do take a moment to subscribe to CIO's YouTube channel, where in addition to these interviews with prominent US-based CIOs, you can also find several international editions of the podcast featuring senior IT leaders from Canada, India, New Zealand, and Australia. Thanks so much for joining us today, and we'll see you here again next time.